You're on the Bible Forum. I'm Warren Sprouse. We do this every week live. You can catch it up the website, thebibleforum.net. I want to talk to you about Islamization. I don't know if you know anything about it, know how it works, but it's a tried and true program that's been effective for Muslims for 1,000 years. And it's being worked on us here as a nation. On September 28, just last month, 2019, a convention of the right, that's what it's called, a convention of the right, took place in Paris. It was organized by Marianne Maréchal, a former member of the French Parliament, now director of France's Institute of Social, Economic, and Political Sciences. The purpose of the convention was to unite France's right-wing political factions, meaning the conservative wing, the wing that does not support the Islamization of France, with the other side. Today there are more than 600 no-go zones in France. Every year, hundreds of thousands of immigrants are coming mainly from Muslim countries. They settle in France, as well as other European countries, and add to the country's Muslim population. Most of those who preceded them have not integrated. Since January 2012, more than 260 people in France have been murdered in terrorist attacks, and more than 1,000 wounded. The numbers may increase in the coming months. Things are getting a little tense over there. The authorities continue to call the attackers mentally ill. That may fit, but they are primarily Muslim. Maréchal described the country's no-go zones as foreign enclaves in French territory and depicted as a process of colonization, the growing presence in France of Muslims who refuse to integrate. The liberal French press went on the offensive, condemning and attacking those who would suggest such a thing. The pollster Jérôme Fourquet, in his recent book, The French Archipelago, points out that France today is a country where Muslims and non-Muslims live in separate societies, hostile to each other. Fourquet also emphasizes that a growing number of Muslims living in France say they want to live according to Sharia law and place Sharia law above French law. Fourquet notes that 26% of French Muslims born in France want to obey only Sharia. For French Muslims born abroad, the figure rises to 46%. Anti-liberal, anti-immigration French writer and political journalist Éric Zemmour insists that what is happening is a colonization. Zemmour had been hauled into court several times in the recent past, has had to pay a lot of heavy fines. But on September 19, he was fined 3,000 euros, that's 3,300 American dollars, for something called incitement to racial hatred, and also incitement to discrimination. What did he do? He didn't do anything. He said in 2015 that, quote, in countless French suburbs where many young girls are veiled, a struggle to Islamize territories is taking place, end of quote. Now, in a society where freedom of speech exists, it would be possible to discuss the use of these statements. But in France today, freedom of speech has been almost completely destroyed. And destroyed largely because of Islamization. On October 3rd, 5 days after Zemmour's speech, 4 police employees were murdered in Paris police headquarters by a man who had converted to Islam. The murderer had gone every week to a mosque where an imam who lives in a no-go zone 10 miles north of Paris made radical remarks. Harpon had been working at police headquarters for 16 years. he had recently shared on social networks a video showing an imam calling for jihad and saying that, quote, the most important thing for a Muslim is to die as a Muslim, end of quote. A month before that, on September 2nd, an Afghan man who had the status in France of a political refugee slit the throat of a young man and injured several other people on the street in a suburb of Lyon. He announced that the fault of those he killed or injured was that they did not read the Quran. The police immediately stated that he was mentally ill and that his attack had nothing to do with Islam. Soon, in France, no one will dare to say that any attack openly inspired by Islam has any connection with Islam. It is an amazing thing to us over here, to me, a free-thinking human being, that things like this could happen. But it's happening in France. It's also happening in the United States. There are enclaves, many of which are up in Michigan, Minnesota, up in that area, who are acting the same way. Not as overt, not as completely controlled as this. But that is the process, the program of Islam. To move into a community, when you reach a percentage, a set amount of people there, and you've got a solid base, then you start demanding rights and you start accomplishing some of these things. We're going to see that in this country, probably before I die. And I'm not going to live much longer.